Recognizes the Vice Chairman of the Subcommittee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The preservation of our national security, I think, is every member of Congress's constitutional responsibility, and I and this committee remain committed to finding policy solutions which promote U.S. interests and keep bad actors away. I want to thank Chairman Barr and Ranking Member Moore for holding today's hearing. I'm also glad to see this subcommittee making CFIUS a priority. I look forward to learning more about this important interagency committee and the best ways that Congress can potentially improve it while at the same time still promoting foreign investment to the U.S. I thank the witnesses for their time, and I thank many of them for their service to this nation and their prior involvement with CFIUS. Our nation is indebted to your dedication. Mr. Hunter, I want to start with you. Thank you for being here today, and I too share your concerns about the gap existing where a foreign investor seeks to acquire an asset that is not a U.S. business. The example in your testimony of fallow land near a military base was particularly concerning to me because I represent a large portion of Fort Hood, the largest military base we have. So does a change need to be made to codify the inclusion of sensitive assets by CFIUS, and can you explain what a provision could look like to achieve that goal?
Thank you. I think the solution is really quite simple. It's just to say specifically that real estate can be covered. At present, you need to have a covered transaction involving a U.S. business being acquired by a foreign person. The limitation of a foreign business, a U.S. business is an asset plus a commercial activity. Fallow land, land that's not being used doesn't have a commercial activity. So you just define specifically land. Easily done.
Okay. Another question. I agree with your assessment that foreign direct investment in the United States is positive for the economy. When companies invest in America, they bring jobs. They bring facilities and further development. But it's concerning to me that CFIUS delays could create uncertainty that drives away investment. So how can we modernize CFIUS in such a way that makes the U.S. more attractive to development, but at the same time does not compromise our national security?
Thank you. A great question. The timelines, as I've mentioned in written testimony, have gotten longer in practice. The intelligence community does a fantastic job of producing their analysis very quickly, but it is a committee and so requires a lot of debate internally within CFIUS. The resources that Ranking Member Moore highlighted at the outset, I think, are a key component of that. Second thing is I would be very cautious about what additional responsibilities one gives to CFIUS. The export control issues are very important issues, in fact, maybe the most sensitive issues, but the CFIUS process would come to a grinding halt if one were to put all of that inside of CFIUS instead of doing it through a reform of the export control procedures.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Scissors, I'm concerned with patterns of targeted investment by Chinese state-owned enterprise into this critical U.S. infrastructure. For example, the investments that Chinese groups have already made into the U.S. rail manufacturing. Do you believe that involvement of Chinese state-owned enterprise in U.S. critical infrastructure has or could potentially jeopardize our nation's ability to effectively respond to national security threats? That would be my first question.
The way I'd put it is, again, I don't think it matters that it's a state-owned enterprise, except that they have access to more Chinese government funding. So the size is what matters there, not the ownership. I think what we should consider with regard to China is not what's happening now. Right now, China is trying to expand its rail industry all around the world, not just in the U.S., not principally in the U.S., mostly in Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. But if it's owned by a Chinese entity, it is a future national security risk. I don't know any other way to put it. So I think what you look at is the size of the transaction, the extent of Chinese involvement, and the future risk, not the current risk. At present, I would say the Chinese have no interest in disrupting U.S. national security preparations, but a Chinese entity is controlled by the party, and if the party changes its mind, so does the Chinese entity.
Real quick, is there more that you think we can do to modernize our investment review laws to address the challenge we're talking about?
Yes, I mean, this is where my colleague and I disagree. We've heard people talk about not overburdening CFIUS. The way I would not overburden CFIUS is make it clear that there is one primary national security risk to the United States, and it comes from China. Everything else is much smaller in comparison. So when we give CFIUS additional tasks, whether they're a little bit of an additional task or a lot of additional tasks, we can focus on the primary country of concern, which is the Chinese side. We're not worried about the Iranians buying up U.S. security rail assets. They don't have the money.
Okay, thank you for your testimony, and I yield my time back.
Gentleman yield